Okay, guys, we're going to kind of wind up imperialism and move on towards World War I. So, ended up talking about Theodore Roosevelt and the Roosevelt Corollary, very famous political cartoon here. We looked at this, we analyzed his big stick diplomacy, the fact that he was arbitrating between Europe and our hemisphere with the Venezuelan crisis. He's also going to arbitrate the end of the Japanese and Russian war and get a Nobel Peace Prize for that. So this is a kind of a showing the strength of the United States over. Remember that Roosevelt Corollary, a consequence addition to the United States is responsible for this hemisphere. Other nations stay out of the Western Hemisphere, and the United States will guarantee stability. We have made our piece of the West. So we've established Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy, that's military might. Taft's diplomacy is going to be called dollar diplomacy, economic might. And then when we have Woodrow Wilson as president, he's going to be missionary or moral diplomacy. So we're going to talk about those three. Okay, so moving along from Roosevelt, Taft becomes president, and he says, you know, I'm going to substitute dollars for bullets, and he is going to stress economic power, promoting growth and trade in the United States to expand our. And of course, we've been looking towards China. China is divided up by all these European nations into what they call spheres of influence. And spheres of influence, those are areas of China that are controlled by other European nations. They're paying off the warlords, and they've kind of just divided it up into their own separate areas. And the empress, who had been, you know, the dynasties for thousands of years, the current empress had little or no power over these European. John Hay wants a little piece of that. And remember, John Hay is that Secretary of State who had said that the Spanish-American War was a splendid little war. Well, he's still around, and he comes up with an idea of free trade, and he's going to call that the open door policy, and he is going to advance that to all of these European nations that are in China. Another wonderful political cartoon, which I really want you to pay attention to these political cartoons. You've got Uncle Sam here, and he's got this trade treaty in his hand, open door policy, and you see China down here. Now, what are these European nations doing? You can always tell who they are. The Germans with the funny hats here, the French with the feathers on top, the English. Then you've got, I'm not even sure exactly who these are. These guys are probably maybe Portugal. You've got maybe Spain. And in the background, you've got a guy sharpening up his scissors. And what are they doing? They are dividing up China. You notice who's missing here, and that is China.
As the 20th century opened, China was in turmoil. Corruption was widespread. Opium addiction was endemic. Rebellion, drought, and famine claimed the lives of 60 million Chinese. Foreign nations had divvied up the empire into spheres of influence, areas where one country had exclusive rights to trade, invest, and had special political rights. With a coaling base in the Philippines just 400 miles from China, American businesses hoped to take advantage of China's vast resources and sell to her vast market. John Hay, then U.S. Secretary of State, had a brilliant idea. He sent letters to all the foreign powers suggesting an open-door policy in China. This policy would help U.S. businesses by guaranteeing equal trading rights for all, preventing one nation from discriminating against another. At the same time, the open-door policy maintained the territorial integrity of China an idea that appealed to anti-imperialists at home. Other powers politely put Hay off, saying that while an open-door policy is a good idea in principle, they had no way of enforcing it. However, Hay, despite the debate, boldly announced that everyone had agreed to the policy. Everyone, that is, except China. Cixi, Empress Dowager of the Qing dynasty, was eager to rid her empire of these foreigners. In northern Shandong province, a secret society known as the Fists of Righteous Harmony attracted thousands of followers. They, too, wanted to rid China of foreign influences, but they also sought to throw off the yoke of the corrupt Chinese government. Foreigners called members of this society boxers because they practiced martial arts. Boxers believed that through meditation and discipline, they could cloak themselves in a mystical shield, so foreign bullets could not harm them. The Empress welcomed the boxers as China's defenders and turned their fury squarely against the foreign community. In June 1900, the boxers began their bloody campaign. They murdered hundreds of foreign missionaries and Chinese Christian converts, destroying millions of dollars worth of property. About 900 foreigners blockaded themselves in their embassies for nearly 2 months, repelling waves of boxers.
Ammunition, food, and medical supplies were almost gone. Then shortly before dawn, loud explosions rocked the city. Weary defenders staggered to the barricades expecting a final, overpowering boxer attack.
But instead, relief had arrived. Troops from Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and the U.S. fought their way into Peking to free their countrymen and put down the rebellion. The boxers, believing they were impervious to bullets, were cut down by the thousands. On September 7, 1901, China and 11 other nations signed the Boxer Protocol, snuffing out the rebellion.
So the Empress's loyal followers, the boxers, they were actually a force that were very, very good with martial arts, the Righteous Fists of Harmony. They rallied to get rid of this influence, and it is futile. They have swords, and this force is going to come in with weapons, and they are not going to be able to do it.
In the 19th century, foreign nations had been encroaching into China during their century of humiliation. Britain, France, Russia, Japan, Germany, and other nations had established foreign enclaves, concessions, and spheres of influence in China. The Chinese didn't welcome the foreigners and modernization and religion that they brought with them. In response, the men from Shandong banded together in 1898 and formed the Righteous and Harmonious Society. They claimed spirit possessions made them invincible and would impress locals by putting on performances and displaying their martial arts skills, for which they earned their nickname, Boxers. Between 100,000 and 300,000 men, who were mainly young and unemployed, would join the Boxers during the uprising. Violence erupted in the late 1890s. Boxers and similar groups attacked churches and missionaries. Shortly afterwards, a small group of Boxers clashed with the Qing dynasty forces. However, in the wake of the battle, the Boxers ordered, support the Qing, destroy the foreigners. 1898 also saw Empress Dowager Cixi seize power after failed modernization policies. In 1900, she issued edicts defending the Boxers with the hope that they would help rid China of foreign influence. Ever-increasing Boxers then started to move from Shandong towards Beijing. In May 1900, European diplomats called for assistance to defend the foreign quarters of the city, but only 400 naval troops from 8 separate nations were able to make it to Beijing. They came from Britain, USA, Japan, Germany, Austria, France, Italy, and Russia. As small-scale fighting broke out in the capital between the Boxers and the foreign troops, even more reinforcements were requested. 2,000 troops in total, from the same 8 nations as before, landed in Tianjin and began to make their way to Beijing. However, they had not asked permission to land, which upset the Qing dynasty, who now saw it as an invasion. The Chinese government now finally decided to align themselves with the Boxers and drive the foreigners out. The new alliance of the government and the Boxers were able to defeat the invading troops in battle and force them to retreat. Back in Beijing, on June the 20th, the siege of the legation quarters officially began. The legation quarters were located right next to the Forbidden City, where the Empress Dowager lived. Inside, only around 400 troops protected 400 foreign civilians and 3,000 Chinese Christians. Although the Chinese had tens of thousands of men at their disposal, they first tried to burn the defenders out. Then, their small assaults were fended off. Meanwhile, in the north, 100,000 Russian troops moved into Manchuria. They crushed the Boxers who had been harassing the construction of the Russian railway line in the region, and within a couple months, they occupied all of Manchuria. In Tianjin, 50,000 troops from 8 nations had been building troop numbers for a while, and on July 14th, this major force prepared to move to Beijing to relieve the besieged. The released force made it into Beijing in mid-August and defeated the Chinese in the city, ending the 55-day-long siege. Fighting finished, however, there were numerous atrocities committed after the war. Looting, rape, and killings were commonplace. The Empress Dowager had already fled the city, and there was no desire to continue the war. Peace treaty forced the Chinese to pay war reparations and give Western powers even more enclaves and concessions. Russia continued to occupy Manchuria, and this resulted in the outbreak of the Russo-Japanese War a couple years later. To the Chinese, this war was just another war which weakened the dynasty and helped pave the way for the revolution of 1911.
So the Boxer Rebellion, it ends with an 8-nation for the very first time. Different nations send soldiers over, and of course with the Russians coming from the north, the Boxers are defeated. In Beijing, after 55 days, this is over, and this is the end of the dynasties. You can see here again support for the troops going into China. You see the American flag, a child down here, a woman has been killed. They've got heads on stakes, and here we are coming to the rescue. A fair field and no favor. I'm out for commerce, not conquest. So, you know, here we are, we're portraying ourselves as the good guys. So that's a summary. This is the end of the dynasties in China. An 8-nation coalition for the very first time is formed to defeat the Boxers, and this is the sad for China. This is going to be a period of time where they are going to be occupied by Russia, by Japan, and actually not really taking their country back until after World War II. Okay, we're going to move on to missionary diplomacy, and this is Woodrow Wilson. He is going to stress who's the good guy, who's wearing the white hat, who is doing the right thing. So intervention only for noble reasons. And he said, you know, we'd prefer to be isolationists, but if we have to go in to do good, we will do. So the first instance of that under Wilson is in Haiti, and Haiti had from the very beginning, with the slave rebellion against the French, it's been chaotic, one coup after another, and there was a major revolution. People were killing each other in the streets, and Wilson is going to send troops in. And when he does, he says, we're just going to stay there till we can cool things down. And as you can see, it took a long time, because we are there for about 18 years, from 1915 to 19. The next time we go in, it's Danish West Indies, and basically Denmark is in need of money. They have gotten into World War I in 1914. They are in dire straits. They cannot provide for their colony, and they say, hey, would you like to buy our islands? And we said, sure. So for $25 million, we end up buying the Danish West Indies, and that is now the present-day Virgin Islands. In Mexico, there's a Mexican Revolution, and again, there was a lot of these revolutions going on in Mexico. A long history of corruption and coups, military coups, and we had supported one of the leaders, and Pancho Villa wanted support for a different one. So Wilson says no, and Pancho Villa, who we are going to learn a little bit more about, he ends up crossing the border into New Mexico, kills some U.S. mining engineers, and then scurries back into Mexico. Wilson is going to send troops after Pancho Villa. And this is Pancho Villa, and you can see he has a crew that is well armed. And there's Pancho Villa riding to victory. And this is a story about Pancho Villa. It's one of my very favorite videos.
Now, let's move on to that story I mentioned to you at the beginning of the lesson.
Okay, I love that guy.
In
So now you know a little bit.
1877, in San Juan del Rio, Durango, a baby boy was born named Doroteo Arango. Now, the name Doroteo is the masculine form of the name Dorothy. He was born to a poor family that worked on an hacienda in Mexico. Now, haciendas were huge ranches that were bigger than some states here in the United States of America. The workers on these haciendas were often abused and worked as slave labor. Doroteo grew up with a real distaste for the wealthy ruling class of Mexico. When he was about 15 years old, he came home to find his sister being beaten up and abused by one of the owners of the hacienda. Doroteo was furious. He shot and killed the man. Realizing that Doroteo would be sentenced to death for the killing of this owner of the ranch, his mother sent him away to hide from the authorities. He fled to the mines in the northern part of Mexico and began working. He changed his name so that the authorities wouldn't be able to find him. He changed his name to Francisco Pancho Villa. Pancho soon grew weary of working in the mines and found that stealing cattle was easier and more profitable. After he had stolen a few cattle, he gathered some of his friends so that they could rustle even more cattle and increase their profits. Official government biographies list his occupation as wholesale meat seller. As his gang grew, Pancho Villa found that rather than steal cattle and go through the trouble of selling them, he could go directly to the bank and steal the money from there. He continued his life as a bandido until 1910, when he joined forces with Francisco I. Madero's revolutionary forces. So he changed from being a bandido, a bandit, to being a revolutionary. Pancho Villa led a group known as the División del Norte, the Division of the North. This group was large and very famous, including even a group of soldiers from the United States of America. Well, the revolution was a success, and Villa was given the rank of general. He was so well known that the President of the United States seemed to support him as the next leader of Mexico. Well, when the next revolution occurred in Mexico, Villa sided with a man named Obregón, okay? And they were against a man named Carranza. Well, the U.S. came out in support of Carranza, and this made Villa feel that the U.S. had abandoned him. He felt so bad that he plotted to get revenge on the United States of America. On March 9th, 1916, Pancho Villa crossed the border with about 600 men and attacked the town of Columbus, New Mexico, here in the United States of America, killing 17 American citizens and destroying part of the town. Now, this was the only time before or since that an organized force of foreign soldiers invaded the United States to wage war. Well, the Americans here were outraged by the attack, and they mounted a force of 150,000 troops to enter Mexico and capture Pancho Villa. Well, the people in Mexico, on the other hand, viewed his excursion as a great blow by a smaller force against the mighty U.S. Pancho Villa was seen as a hero in Mexico. When the U.S. troops asked anyone where Villa was down in Mexico, they all shrugged their shoulders and said, "I don't know where he is." The U.S. forces stayed in Mexico for months without being able to track Villa down. In 1920, Villa formed a truce with the new government by laying down his arms in exchange for land and amnesty. He then retired to a ranch near Parral, Chihuahua, and he lived happily and briefly on his ranch. You see, in 1923, he was assassinated by political enemies. Well, upon his death, no fewer than 26 women came forward claiming to have married Pancho Villa during his time as a soldier and bandido. Francisco Pancho Villa was, and still is, the only leader of a foreign army to enter the United States to wage battle. That was a beautiful story.
Villa. So the troops are sent to catch him, and they do not catch him. He asks for the Buffalo Soldiers, that 9th and 10th Cavalry, to help pursue Pancho Villa because they are such valiant fighters, and because of that, General Pershing gets the nickname Blackjack Pershing. And this is a little bit of review. Remember, the foreign policy is big stick diplomacy with Roosevelt, dollar diplomacy with Taft, and missionary diplomacy with Wilson. So we're going to have a quick quiz over, well, I say quick quiz. We're going to have a quiz on imperialism. So when I say quickly look over your notes, make sure your notes are complete, and we will post that quiz.